In recent days, South Korea has been balancing its regional diplomatic initiatives with its responsibility for national safety amid the violence in the Middle East, where thousands of South Korean nationals reside. We have more on Press Perspective today. Hello, welcome to Press Perspective for this Wednesday, March 4th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Today we walk through South Korea's regional diplomatic endeavors amid the latest outbreak of violence in the Middle East. For more on this, I have independent journalist Kelly Kasulis Cho here in the studio. Kelly, welcome back.
Happy to be here, thanks.
I also have Fabian Kretschmer with German press agency DPA with us. Fabian, it's good to have you here.
Also happy to be here.
Kelly, let us start with the foreign media assessment of President Lee Jae Myung's agenda in Singapore, as well as your takeaways then.
Yeah, we've been seeing Lee Jae Myung and previous South Korean presidents really reaching out more to Central, Southeast Asia, the Arab world as well. And a lot of this is really in the kind of uncertain relationship with the United States, probably a good move diplomatically. And so this meeting has really been billed as the launch of an AI alliance between Singapore and South Korea. It's not so clear what that means, but obviously you take two very technologically advanced countries that are very export-oriented. It could be a pretty powerful partnership. In the meeting, Prime Minister Wang and President Lee also vowed to update their free trade agreement that was established in 2006 to strengthen ties there. That's very important for South Korea, given that it's still a very heavily export-driven economy. It's facing, obviously this ongoing, very uncertain tariff row with the United States. And they also mentioned that they want to do some cooperation on nuclear energy as well. Given the current events of what's going on in the Middle East, I mean, certainly South Korea gains to benefit from, more strong energy partners around the world. South Korea is heavily reliant on the Middle East in terms of oil and other energy imports. So all this to be said, it wasn't a meeting with a smoking gun, so to speak, but I think, it shows that South Korea is really trying to throw its weight around, its cultural power, its economic power, but also grow that in the rest of Asia, especially since its traditional alliance of kind of piggybacking on its historic ties with the United States seems more and more uncertain as time goes on.
Right. Now, from the Philippines, President Lee Jae Myung flew from Singapore, that is. The president flew to the Philippines. What aspects of his agenda there in the Philippines, Fabian, were covered by the foreign media?
Well, I mean, this topic was not news of the day because it was overshadowed by the recent escalation in the Middle East. But yeah, foreign media noted that, Lee Jae Myung met with Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. And they talked also about AI, cooperation in terms of nuclear energy and shipbuilding. And I think, that's also part of South Korea's attempt to diversify its economy, and Southeast Asia is a really emerging, kind of vibrant. You have a lot of growth rates also in the Philippines, so it's also a potential market. One aspect that I found interesting is that both sides also agreed for a lot of cooperation for the defense industry. So Lee Jae Myung promised that South Korean companies would modernize the military of the Philippines. That I found quite interesting. And both sides also discussed the situation in the Middle East, but the wording remained very vague, so there was not more details on that. But I mean, of course, both acknowledged that, the geopolitical situation is very uncertain right now.
Right, and speaking about the Middle East, so as we've been saying, South Korea's latest diplomatic endeavors came amid the sudden launch of a U.S.-Israeli military operation against Iran. What is the latest with regard to remarks from the White House about its military mission in the Middle East?
I think a lot of people are trying to get a sense of what the U.S. and Israel's endgame is here, and that's not really clear. A couple of days ago when this war, which is what I think we should be calling it, started, it wasn't clear if this was going to be like the last time the U.S. struck Iran and it was just going to be, hitting some military targets, or if this would drag out. But based on what President Trump has been saying, there's been some indication that it could drag out. The latest is that he said that the U.S. and Israel might be bombarding this region for 4 to 5 weeks. And the way he said that was very off the cuff. It's not clear if that's really the plan or if it could go on for even longer. But earlier today, President Trump also said that the U.S. and Israel hit not only, the compound that had killed the supreme leader of Iran, but also had killed multiple people that were potential successors. We don't know exactly who has been targeted or who has died yet, but I mean, that would suggest that the United States and Israel are really trying to wipe out a line of succession. And President Trump had also said that the justification for this was that whoever was going to replace the supreme leader could be, quote unquote, as bad as the supreme leader. It seems to me like they're looking for kind of a long game regime change here, and that this could really, drag out. I think it's worth noting, the numbers are pretty astounding. The U.S. Central Command said that there are 50,000 troops involved with this, 2 major aircraft carriers, 200 fighters. People have been evacuating from more than a dozen countries. We know that air travel in the Middle East is shut down. The death toll is over 900, as far as we understand. That video footage of the hotel, the international hotel in Dubai, being hit by a missile, this does seem quite serious. And I think everyone's just trying to get a sense of, is this going to be a war of a few months, a few weeks, a few years? And I don't really have the answer.
Right. Now, as Kelly said, Fabian, Iran, it has been launching a fierce retaliation campaign against the attack from the U.S. and Israel. Could you tell us a bit more about Iran's response?
Yeah, sure. Of course, Iran launched a lot of attacks against U.S. assets in the region, for example, U.S. military bases. That was to be expected, of course. There was also attacks against Israel. But I think one aspect was a little bit surprising, namely how many countries became targets of Iran attacks. And I have a list here. I will, just name them: UAE, United Arab Emirates. Actually, as Kelly mentioned, that in Dubai, when a hotel was hit, that was really the worst PR for the country that you could imagine, because Dubai is a place full of influencers, and they were all on the weekend live streaming and suddenly finding out, wow, this is not safe here, and they have to leave. And yeah, so it was really not good for the interests of UAE. Qatar was hit, Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Jordan, Oman, and even Cyprus, because on Cyprus you had one British facilities, and Britain became a target because in the end they did allow to let the US use one of their military bases to start an attack, a defensive attack, as Keir Starmer said. And Great Britain became actually a target, a rhetorical target by Trump, because he was not happy that UK did not cooperate with the US strongly enough. But then it also became a target of the Iran, because they did allow some US attacks, US strikes from one of their military bases. So it's a big regional conflict, and it could escalate even further.
Right. Now, Kelly, as Fabian mentioned, President Lee Jae Myung addressed the violence in the Middle East during a joint press conference with Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Now, he called for peace and stability, especially keeping in mind that there are believed to be 21,000 South Korean nationals residing in that region. What more can you tell us about the official stance of the government here with regard to the violence in the Middle East, and of course about the South Koreans, their fate in the Middle East?
Right. So right after Iran's supreme leader was killed, President Lee launched kind of an emergency response initiative to the relevant ministries in the South Korean government. And he made it very clear that the first order of priority is making sure that South Koreans are safe, that they get evacuated if need be, that they are able to get travel back to the peninsula over here. And then his second priority was looking at the potential economic impacts of this, especially if this conflict or war were to sustain, which it looks like it might for quite some time. And so my understanding is that some 140 South Koreans were just evacuated on Tuesday out of Israel and Iran to Turkmenistan and Egypt. But as you mentioned, there are so many more. There are a lot of Koreans in Dubai, for instance, and air travel has essentially been shut down. So, for instance, I know someone from the opposite end of this that is stuck in South Korea and can't go home to the Middle East. So I think, it's all about keeping people safe at this time. And then longer term, I mean, it's no secret that the Korean economy has been struggling. It hasn't been growing at the rate that it's used to. It's heavily reliant on exports. It's been hit significantly by the Trump tariff regime. And so with energy specifically, South Korea is pretty reliant on the Middle East, and the shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz really could affect that. The Kospi index certainly was tumbling compared to even other parts of Asia when this first broke out. So it looks like, first and foremost, it's about getting Koreans who are abroad in the diaspora somewhere safe. There's a lot of business dealings in Saudi Arabia, Dubai, the UAE more generally. And then the second would be to protect the economy. I think I saw a figure that there are $68 billion in South Korean projects in that part of the Middle East that are in jeopardy of being suspended, stopped, destroyed, even the way the bombardment's going. So we'll have to see.
Right. And Fabian, what more can you tell us about the potential impact of a prolonged warfare on the South Korean economy, as well as that of East Asian countries like Japan and China, and of course Europe?
Well, the economic impact is potentially huge, and today we already saw a taste of that. I mean, the Kospi plunged 12%. I would call it historic. And let me explain the reasons. Iran de facto closed the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is very important for oil trade. Almost 30% of global seaborne oil trade runs through this trade route. And, East Asian economies are very depending on oil imports, especially Japan and South Korea. So, for example, for South Korea, 70% of the country's crude oil imports comes from the Middle East, and a large part of this usually goes through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that is not possible. It's really highly risky for ships to pass through that trade route. But, the country still has reserves. South Korea said that, for the next 200 days, we should be fine to supply the country with crude oil. And I think for the next 50 days, there's enough reserves in terms of LNG. But higher oil prices have a huge impact in South Korea, especially. Why? Because you have a lot of chip makers. That's an industry that is energy hungry. There's a high demand. And I think you notice that the South Korean economy is quite depending on their semiconductor companies, Samsung Electronics, SK Hynix, and you don't have as much of diversification of the economy as you might wish for in a situation like this. So what we see now is really high or a collapse of the Kospi. But I have to say that recently, or at least since the last year, there was a bull market of Kospi. So actually, investors made a lot of money. I mean, last year over, I think, 75%. And even this year to date, the Kospi is still in plus. I mean, but you could see that because there were so many profits being made, that investors were now very insecure, and they wanted to basically realize their profits. And so you could see maybe even more a downturn compared to even the Nikkei or the Hang Seng. Let's see how that will play out in the coming days.
Right, indeed. Meanwhile, with regard to the broader ripple effects of the violence in the Middle East, Kelly, some observers believe that the events there will perhaps reinforce North Korea's ambition with regard to its nuclear weapons. What have you been hearing on the ground?
Yeah, that's the classic take with how North Korea responds to, the U.S.'s dealings with Iran. North Korea is probably looking at this event and seeing it as, at least for their narrative, a further justification of them continuing to develop nuclear weapons. And there's probably some truth to that, right? The story is essentially that based on the justification of a nuclear threat, the United States topples Iran's leadership and then says it topples, its potential successors. And now we have a greater regional war. So in some ways, this is the exact nightmare scenario that North Korea is talking about. Kim Jong-un immediately condemned the U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran. I don't think that's particularly surprising, but looking at Korean media, there's been some interesting takes. For instance, it's been pointed out that Kim Jong-un's father, the previous leader, Kim Jong-il, he was pretty silent when the U.S. first attacked Afghanistan and Iraq, and that he was kind of a recluse. I think he was even gone out of state media for like 50 days after one of those instances, whereas North Korea seems quite confident this time in rejecting this behavior in the Middle East and condemning the United States. I also saw one take saying that this might be an opportunity for the U.S. and North Korea to talk about nuclear weapons again. I don't know what to make of that. I mean, North Korea has certainly shown no interest in that, and the general storyline that we have seen since the last round of inter-Korean relations and nuclear talks in 2018 and beyond was that, post-COVID, North Korea is really not that interested in engaging on the subject with South Korea or the United States, and it's more of an isolated society, at least compared to pre-COVID, than it's been in decades. So I really don't think that would necessarily be true, but you never know.
Right, that is a valid observation, of course. But according to some observers, Fabian, during his party's 9th Congress last month, North Korea's Kim Jong-un spoke about possible dialogue with North Korea, while of course rooting out any such possibility with South Korea. What are your thoughts with regard to this discrepancy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually I read it very carefully what Kim Jong-un said during the Congress, and it was astonishing. Well, let me maybe tell you that traditionally North Korea has always maintained the stance that if the country wants to debate nuclear issues, then it should do so with the US, and it has always denied South Korea any strategic autonomy, basically saying that South Korea is getting orders from the US, and I'm paraphrasing here the North Korean stance, and we basically have to deal with the US directly. And of course, it's frustrating for Seoul, because President Lee Jae Myung, he has been trying to reach out to North Korea, he has been very open in restarting inter-Korean relations. So far, North Korea has shown no interest in doing so. Kim Jong-un said that no matter who's in charge here in Seoul, in the government, we don't want to deal with you. We have nothing to discuss, and the only way to peacefully coexist is basically cutting off all communication, cutting off all exchange, and yeah, it is what it is. But I think from Seoul's perspective, they will keep their course, and maybe, and this is what some observers are also saying, Kim Jong-un might be testing the South. Maybe if South Korea will stay persistent, will show a lot of patience, and also give North Korea some more incentives, then maybe Kim Jong-un might change its stance. But right now, it seems that Kim Jong-un gave up the official goal of peaceful unification, and it seems that he doesn't want to deal with South Korea. It doesn't matter if there's a friendly or a hostile government in Seoul.
Right. Meanwhile, Kelly, this is an impromptu question. Ahead of his military mission against Iran, President Trump was looking forward to his talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping. That talk is supposed to take place at the end of March, the first week, I believe, of April. Do you suppose prospects of that summit are still high, or is that particular summit likely to be postponed?
I don't know. I think some of that will be answerable when we get a better sense of how brutal this conflict is going to be and whether or not it's going to last just a couple of weeks or a couple of months. But I would say the indications of how this has been going, 900 plus dead, civilian targets being hit, Israel, Jordan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, all being dragged into this conflict, it doesn't seem like China would want to seize the opportunity to speak. But then again, I mean, I don't really know. We're dealing with countries, we're kind of dealing with an unprecedented world order. I mean, the UN has been more weakened than ever. I know President Trump has been warning about striking Iran, but it did still come as a surprise, I think, even to foreign policy analysts. And even just the very nature of how this has exploded across the Middle East, it does look a little haphazard. And so this kind of strategic calculation, talking about weeks from now, I wouldn't know.
Right. I don't think anyone would know for now then. All right. I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. Kelly, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. Fabian, thank you very much for your insights. Right, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. We'll return same time tomorrow with more on the broader economic fallout for South Korea for a prolonged military confrontation in the Middle East. Do join us then, and thank you for now.